We at Paxil believe that everyone should have a way to pay bills, purchase goods, send money, and build your own business with Bitcoin. On Paxful, there are more than 300 ways to buy and sell Bitcoin. Be part of the peer-to-peer community. Create an account today.
I watch the Yuan almost daily because I think that's the biggest, most important pair.
The dollar Yuan.
Yep.
Interesting. More important than USD, Bitcoin, BTC?
Well, no, that's the most important to me. But I think globally for Forex, I think the US dollar Yuan has the most signal out of any exchange pair.
Good to know. Well, I think this is a good time to kick off the episode. Everyone, we're going to be talking politics. Ansel thinks the yuan is a very, very important pair for the United States dollar, and we're going to be getting into that as well. You're listening to Fed Watch. I'm CK. All right, Ansel, this is going to be a great show. We got a lot of stuff. A lot has happened in the world. A lot has happened in the U.S. It looks as though Joe Biden is going to be the next president of the United States of America. This has implications for a lot of things. But, you know, with that being a factor, it doesn't seem as though Bitcoin cares at all. Bitcoin has been steadily increasing, and now it's sitting at $15,200 United States dollar. I guess, what's today's date? Today's the 8th?
The 10th.
The 10th, yeah. So I'm a little backwards here, but yeah. What are your thoughts here?
Well, you know, I was calling that it was going to be a landslide for Trump for a long time. And I believe that if it was honestly counted, that it would have been a landslide for Trump. Now, I don't want to get into like if it matters if it was stolen. I believe it was stolen. I mean, it wasn't honestly counted, but I mean, that's what you sign up for if you're going to be in be a statist and vote. So I think people that voted, they got what they kind of deserved in that respect. Now, I think
harsh
it's
words.
Is it a big deal for Bitcoin? No, it's not. Bitcoin is a global phenomenon. It's outside of the United States jurisdiction to really cause it any harm. I don't think it's going to make much difference at all to Bitcoin. Now, you were saying before the show, you were saying before the show that you heard some people from Germany were really into our election.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a fact that this election was the center of the global conversation, all of last week, not just in the United States, but just all of last week. And I mean, I'm speculating that has a lot to do with the fact that the dollar is the global reserve currency. The way that the world expresses value right now is undeniably tethered to the U.S. and undeniably tethered to U.S. politics because of the nature of fiat currency. So I think that that's messed up, and it's a messed up after effect. And we're just seeing the U.S. matter more and more because the dollar matters more and more, and the dollar is so permissioned. And I think it's sad.
Well, yeah, and so many economies around the world are struggling. The U.S., as messed up as it is actually probably the most vibrant economy right now. I mean, minus maybe China, but it's the source of vibrancy and innovation in the world is the United States. So that is why it probably is the center of everything.
So, speaking of China and speaking of the introduction of this podcast, you were saying that the yuan dollar pair is probably the most important forex pair out there in terms of macro implications. Can you talk about that a little bit more and talk about what you were seeing from that pair during the elections? I know that it was swinging wildly as expectations flipped from Trump to Biden.
Well, the reason why I think it's the most important forex pair is because what we've been hearing for so many years now, the last decade, is the rise of China and the fall of the United States. You know, what is it called? The Thucydides trap. Is that what Max Kaiser and Stacy always talk about? Where as one power rises and the other power is declining, then there's always conflict there. I see that as being an important trading pair because of that idea that China is rising. I don't believe that China will rise and overtake the West, but I think that is what people believe. And people have positioned their capital as if that were the case, right? There's a lot of manufacturing that goes on in China, a lot of financing that goes on in China, and it's all centered around the dollar and the yuan. So I think that that's very important. That's why I think it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think it makes sense. And talking about the second part of the question, I can kind of speak to a little bit. I was watching the elections from the eyes of the FTX prediction markets. And throughout, the day of the election, Trump went from an underdog and steadily rose and then actually, increased to close to 80% chance of victory, according to FTX.com. And throughout
until about
that
4 a.m., right?
until about 4 a.m. The next morning. But at that point, the yuan was actually tanking on the dollar against the dollar. And then when the election expectations flipped over to Biden, the dollar and the yuan pair completely flipped, and the yuan has now been gaining. So, I mean, I think that the markets are speaking very clearly with what you're saying, and it's very interesting to see the correlation between Trump and the dollar, Biden and the yuan. So, yeah.
Yeah, the reason why I pointed out 4 a.m. is that's when 150,000 Biden votes dropped on all these states. That's why it looked like Trump was going to win, and then you dumped all these Biden votes, and then it looked like Biden was going to win. But I kind of see it a little bit differently with the yuan. If you kind of go out to a weekly chart for the last, since roughly May, the yuan has really been surging against the dollar. And yeah, we might have had a short-term blip there during the election, but overall, it looks like the yuan is going to strengthen versus the dollar. And that is contrary to a lot of what I've been saying with the strong dollar thesis. The dollar is weakening against the yuan. The way I kind of rationalize that is by saying China's in a whole world of hurt. Their credit bubble is bursting. And when a credit bubble bursts, your people are rushing for cash. So I think that they're in trouble right now financially, and that's why their currency has been appreciating versus the dollar. And when they get a hold of that, it's going to snap back the other way. And when the dollar then is strengthening against the yuan, probably by the end of the year, this will snap back the other way. The strong dollar shortage will rear its ugly head again.
All right. So, I mean, I guess just out of curiosity, how much of that theory would you say is on evidence that you're seeing emerge from China versus kind of you rationalizing your position?
Well, it's their credit bubble is definitely objective fact that we know how much they are. It's like 350 or 400% of GDP that they're in debt. So they're like twice as indebted as the United States. And we know that a lot of their trade is being curtailed right now during the coronavirus. They had a deflationary globalization shock. So, and they are very dependent on their exports. So, no, I think it's pretty objective that they're in deep, deep trouble. Now, how much is actually of this strong yuan is based off of that? Yeah, that would be speculation. I do know that they have tried to raise money in U.S. dollars recently. They had the first ever, auction of their debt directly for U.S. entities. Usually, U.S. entities had to go through domestic entities in China, but now they are opening it up directly to foreign entities. So that is a pretty big sign to me that they are desperate to get dollars more directly into their economy.
Wow. I mean, that sounds very interesting, and I'm sure we will continue to cover that as that develops. So let's now move our speculations away from China, and let's start speculating on it looks like the next president, the president-elect, Joe Biden, and what he could mean for Federal Reserve action tendencies, etc.
Oh man, well, apparently the market really liked it, thinking that stimulus is on its way. But now apparently there's some news out that Biden wants to do like a 3-month lockdown, a national 3-month lockdown. And so that is a kind of reflexively now bringing the market back down. I don't know. I don't really think that there is much that the government is in control of the supply of money, inflation, or anything like that. Personally, I think that Biden kind of symbolizes more government intervention. And so that's usually market people and higher taxes. So usually markets don't like that. I don't know why it went the other way, probably because of that stimulus hope that was being held up, a disagreement between Trump and Pelosi. Pelosi is, for our international listeners, I don't know how many we have, but Pelosi is the Speaker of the House. And so she has some control over legislation. And they were having a confrontation there at the end. That's why Trump couldn't get any more stimulus passed. But now that she's a Democrat and there's a Democrat elect as president, then people would think that there would be stimulus. So I don't know. There's a little bit of both. What's your idea on this?
Well, I mean, I am unsure. I do think that the sudden realization about Joe's most likely corona-enabled actions are now dawning on people that were ignoring the reality that was in front of them. So it's interesting to see the markets react to that, and people on social media react to that. Rumors and speculations. Joe did tweet something along the lines of, "I won't be president until January 20th, but until then, all I have to say is wear a mask." Kind of like insinuating that when he's president, like, we're going to be doing some serious precautions. He's been announcing, professors from UCSF and other highbrow universities, highbrow medical schools that are joining his task force. So coronavirus is not something that he's trying to brush off. It doesn't seem like it. Seems like it's at the center of his immediate agenda. Outside of that, I don't have anything super good to say. It seems as though the swamp in Washington all got reelected. Nancy Pelosi, Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, Mitch McConnell, these people, long-term politicians, they run the show. They are who they are. They're politically aligned. They care about their party line. Like, it's just all those people are back. So it seems as though the Trump experiment didn't wreck any of them. They're still here, which, I don't really know how to feel about that.
One thing I thought was interesting is I think it was 11 or 13, some number up there of women, Republican women, got elected.
I mean, that's an interesting stat. I don't know what to compare it to, but.
Yeah, well, I just think it's interesting because the Republicans are supposed to be the old white man party, and the Democrats are supposed to be the progressives and the I guess, feminist party, and it's the Republicans that's bringing the most women into Congress. So I don't know. I think it's great that there's a divide, a Republican Senate and a Democrat House, and because that is what keeps the most freedom is gridlock. We want the most gridlock possible. And it's also good that I guess Trump was able to get some Supreme Court justices, appointed to the bench, because now there will be even more gridlock. And I think that's good for everybody.
You think that there's going to be gridlock? Because, I mean, maybe that now heavily right-leaning, judicial branch could strike down a lot of actions. Like what happens if a Roe versus Wade gets struck down?
Well, this is getting a little bit more political, but I think that Roe versus Wade is federal. It says nothing about like state laws. So Roe versus Wade can be upheld at the state, or protections can be given to women for their right to choose at the state level. It doesn't necessarily need to be protected at the federal level. I mean, think about the financial regulations, right? Like money transmitter stuff. There's no federal regulations, yet we are this is the US dollar is the global reserve financial system, or financial product. So I don't think we necessarily need to have federal laws to protect things. You can do it at the state level or even local level, and it's probably better to be done at those places.
Yeah, well, no surprise that that's your opinion. Let's let's keep it rolling. I mean, let's talk about Bitcoin a little bit, and that, for the listeners, this is going to be a shorter show. But Bitcoin right now, $5,200. We talked about, really impressive price action from Bitcoin the last month, moving from like what was it, 10,000, and now closing at, closing the month close to $15,000, or beginning November around there. Like that's amazing. Definitely brought a lot of attention to the space, a lot of bullish things being said by macro people. It seems as though Bitcoin is in the zeitgeist. The Overton window has now opened to Bitcoin. What are your expectations from here?
Well, I've been comparing the 2019 move, that we broke out of the consolidation around 3,000 or 3,500, and we went all the way to 14,000. Could we see a similar type of breakout of 10,000 and go all the way to all-time highs? I think we are a little bit more overbought here than we were at that time. So I don't expect it to be easy to go from, continue from 15,000 and break through the all-time high. Is that possible? Yes. Is it possible to touch the all-time high? I think that's a good possibility. But I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think we still have some consolidation to do. This bull market is going to be kind of nice and measured. So I would look for the beginning half of 2021 to see some real excitement.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that kind of fits into what I'm projecting, and I'm just really kind of basing it on 2017, right? The halving happened in 2016. Mid to late 2017 is when the fireworks happened. So if you were to just paint that over to now, that says, somewhere in 2021. But yeah, I mean, I have to say
Sorry, I have a question for you. Do you think that at breaking the all-time high here, in this stage of like geopolitical arena here that we have in the world, is Bitcoin going to be fought more as it breaks the all-time high? Is it going to, the spotlight going to come onto it, and you think it's going to get more negative attention in the world? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, it's tough to say. Like, it seems as though the money is positive on it. And that makes me think that there's going to be a lot of tailwinds that would make Bitcoin difficult to touch in the United States, which is probably the most important jurisdiction. We've already seen that even China doesn't matter. And in China, like, I have to say, like, they're Chinese people in the world, they're much more, I mean this in the most respectful way possible. They operate much more like pirates globally than Americans or Europeans, in terms of doing business and stuff like that. At least like maybe smaller people, smaller organizations and smaller groups and entities. So I just feel like they're used to trying to, launder money out of China, use technology to evade, China and stuff like that. And I just think that, I don't know, like if the US doesn't do anything, like I can't see anyone really being able to stop Bitcoin now. And then what happens when Bitcoin's 100K? What happens when Bitcoin's 200K? Like there's a completely different world. And that's just the beginning of the S curve. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, I don't know, that like maybe I'm just too bullish. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that Bitcoin won't be affected, but we can see some, high profile people getting arrested. That's one of the things to kind of tie this back into politics is Trump has an opportunity now to pardon some really important people. If he could pardon Julian Assange, he could pardon Edward Snowden, he could free Ross. I have my Free Ross t-shirt on today. He could
show it.
The Silk Road, Free Ross. If he could do some high profile pardons, I think that would be really great for him to do on the way out. Now, I'm not a big Trump supporter. I didn't vote for Trump. So whatever, but I think that would be a great thing for humanity if he can pardon those people, because free speech is really what we need to, we're going to be fighting a lot of the big tech kind of censorship over the next 4 years, because Trump had the opportunity to rein that in. But I think Biden has this symbiotic relationship with them. And so that I don't think anything's going to stand in the way of more draconian censorship on the part of big tech.
Yeah, with that being said, let's react about Twitter a little bit. Like, have you been observing what we've been seeing on Twitter in terms of the UX as well as like messaging and censorship and stuff like that?
Fill me in.
my dishwasher is making a lot of noise right now. I'm trying to pass this back to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I've tried to stay off of Twitter, actually. This election cycle has triggered me. Unfortunately, I was unable to stay, objective in this whole thing. And so I tried to stay off Twitter as much as I could. I did know that there was a lot of censorship of news items from like the New York Post and other type of news outlets. So I don't know what you're talking about with the UX. I know that they had made some changes, like you had to, when you retweet, you have to make a comment, or that's the default now is to make a comment. So yeah. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they're doing that, to make it harder for people to just blindly hit retweet. Now they hit it, it's like make a comment, and then you actually have to hit retweet again in order for it to just blank retweet. But
I'm a Dorsey supporter, though, aren't you?
But see, the thing is like I don't think that this is Dorsey. Like I think that either. Twitter is very much out of Dorsey's hands. I think if you want to see what Dorsey would do, look at Square. Like that's a position where he is much more in control of that business, and you can clearly see what he's doing: buying Bitcoin, supporting Bitcoin development with Square Crypto, selling Bitcoin with Cash App. Like, what more could you be asking from the man? You could say that he was the reason that PayPal is even in this, right? He has turned the Overton window open. And then when you watch Bill Miller talk about Bitcoin, he cites PayPal. Like the snowballing effect of Bitcoin adoption looks like that. And, how can you not be a fan of Jack Dorsey, in my opinion?
So what's the impetus behind the censorship on Twitter then?
I just, it's a public company at this point. It's part of the U.S. state. It was such a spotlight of Trump's victory that it was a spotlight of like, we need to do something to make it so it's not the same as last time. It was kind of like the least profitable social media, but the most influential at the same time. So it was the easiest probably to, overtake and corrupt. Well, like so Facebook is a lot more profitable than Twitter. Twitter has some of the worst ad units of social media, but at the same time, it is the center. Like no one's like quoting a Facebook post in the news.
Yeah.
They're quoting tweets. Like Twitter is the epicenter of announcing stuff.
Now, is it a result of where these people are headquartered? Because Has the California political machine infiltrated these companies, and so that it's the actual like political bias of the employees showing through. And so how does Jack not have control over that? How is Jack being overruled is the question.
I just don't know enough about the internal operations. I think that people make all organizations. So, yeah, I mean, if everyone is from the same geography and thinks the same way and acts the same way and votes the same way, then that's what you get. And it's hard to I think that's why the centralization of tech companies like in the Bay Area has had such a big impact, because before that I'm sure there's other centralization points of industry, but it probably didn't have the network effects of San Francisco. So this is the first time we're seeing like these global network effects the same way. And it's impossible to get around the politics of the people that make up those organizations. And that's what, even behind the sovereign individual, like that book is essentially says that all governments are going to, as they are today, welfare states will get bigger because the people within that make up, that work for the government, their incentive is to grow. Like, no one's getting elected by saying, I'm going to cut jobs in the government. No one is.
Yeah. Well, they might get elected by saying they're going to cut taxes.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean they're going to cut jobs.
Yeah, it is hard for a fiscal conservative to get elected. Yeah, before San Francisco, it was mainly New York, right? It was around the financing of all of these businesses. So if we can bring that back to Bitcoin, there is financial censorship as well. We haven't really heard too much about that, where who was it a couple years ago that got their Patreon shut down? I think Sargon of Akkad, I think was his name. And so he got his Patreon shut down, and then he was taking PayPal subscriptions, and PayPal shut him down as well. So there was some financial censorship going on. But recently I've heard things where when people are getting their YouTubes demonetized or their YouTubes banned, and they're going to make alternative media things. I don't know if you've heard of Locals. Is like an alternative to Facebook, I believe, and it's done by Dave Rubin, who is one of these YouTubers, and he has signed a exclusive deal with Stripe. So Stripe cannot censor, has promised, at least legally in the contract, to not censor that platform. So that's interesting. Maybe Bitcoin is forcing people to take a look at financial
when they
censorship.
do censor, he'll take Bitcoin more seriously.
Yeah. But maybe Bitcoin is, like you said, moving that Overton window to say, hey, it's a threat. They'll go to Bitcoin instead of you. So don't censor them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That plays a role.
I think that Bitcoin is moving the window on many fronts. Absolutely. Ansel, let's finish off by talking about the difficulty adjustment. There is some things that we can learn about the nature of mining by looking at this negative 16% difficulty adjustment followed by a positive 5% difficulty adjustment. Just to kind of paint the backdrop, the speculation and word around the street is, the rainy season is over in China. All the free hydroelectricity in the Sichuan region is no longer available. So a lot of machines went offline. It was one of the largest negative difficulty adjustments in Bitcoin history, which I think is notable. And then as those machines, I guess, get relocated to higher efficiency areas, they're slowly coming back online. The only, I guess, analysis that I would add to that backdrop is that I think the fact that S9s are still part of the ecosystem, and there's like this massive amount of just existing hardware that is hunting for cheap electricity, and is only coming online when it finds cheap electricity. Otherwise, it's offline. That is a new factor, and it's something that is going to continue to potentially create volatility in the Bitcoin hash rate in the short term. I don't know what the long-term implications are, but there are now more than ever hash rate pirates. you know, it now makes sense to have a bunch of hardware and turn it on, turn it off based on how profitable it is, rather than keep your machine on all the time. And I think that's a key change that we're seeing.
Yeah, it's getting more professional. It's you call them pirates, but it's being smarter and more efficient with your hash rate and having longer term plans, having a strategy. And I think that is good for Bitcoin. I think this hash rate. I wrote a piece for btcm.co. I'll include it in the show notes for this episode. But yeah, I think that the rainy season is what it was. People shut off their hash rate to move it. And there's all sorts of different implications in there. But now that we've seen the hash rate come back on in just 2 weeks, 2 week time, that is exactly what it was from. People were just moving their hash rate to a new location to get different power. This also has price implications, and we can run through that if you would like to.
Yeah, let's do it. Hit me with the analysis.
I'll just read from my piece here. So temporary slowdowns in Bitcoin mining have a positive impact on price. Blocks are found more slowly, meaning fewer transactions per second are able to be confirmed. Bitcoins then move more slowly throughout the world. If demand is constant, the fewer Bitcoins can move to meet that demand, price will increase. There are also fewer Bitcoins being mined per day when blocks are slower. Bitcoin is designed to average 1 block every 10 minutes or 144 blocks per day. With a block reward of 6.25, that comes to 900 Bitcoins a day on average come into the market to meet demand. However, if blocks are 10% slower, that means 10% fewer new coins will be mined to meet demand. 108 instead of 900. That doesn't sound like a lot, but at the current market price of 13,000, so of course it's another 10% higher than that now. That's $1.1 million fewer of Bitcoin per day being mined at those slower block times. If the slowdown in hash rate is not seen by the market as temporary, it could lead to a more sustained downward movement in price as the market loses confidence in the network itself. We believe the recent price movement is in some part due to this dynamic playing out right now, but it also marks a point where price could consolidate for a while before continuing up. Price rises increase the value of everyone's coins, and that naturally leads to people taking profits. As always, the market is finding balance, so the next few weeks could be a period of finding a new stable price level before pushing higher into the end of the year. So that was my price analysis of this.
All right. Well, you guys, if you want to get that every single week, subscribe to the Bitcoin and Markets newsletter and go check out Bitcoin and Markets. Is it btcm.com?
btcm.co is just a new blog that I started. Yeah.
There we go. btcm.co. So make sure to find all of Ansel's work there. Ansel, the only thing I would kind of push back on that analysis is you just didn't mention the difficulty adjustment, and you didn't mention the fact that fees rose during the time of slow blocks. And I totally get how slow blocks can increase Bitcoin's price, but the fact that blocks were coming in slow, we saw a big spike in fee pressure, which means that people who really demanded blocks or to get into the block were willing to pay for it. That also made it very profitable to be mining during that time. And we see that now difficulty is now increasing. There's incentive to come back online. So it seems as though Bitcoin works. It's keeping hash rate stable. And your scenario where people could suspect that there's a downward or death spiral, mining death spiral, or something like that. You called it confidence, that could affect price negatively. I just don't think that that's going to happen. And this was actually an example that proved otherwise.
Yes, I agree. I think that there are multiple different balances going on in the market, and yeah, it would. But fees are not new Bitcoins, so it actually is. It's kind of higher fees are a stimulus to mining or a stimulus to hash rate, but they're kind of a drag on the economy in general, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're right. They're not new Bitcoins. And that's why, the analysis about price, I still think that that's a very good analysis. Ansel, this was a great show. We thought it was going to be an 18-minute show,
Yeah.
but it turned out to be much longer. I love kind of going back and forth on these current events with you. We are going to be getting a lot more awesome guests on the show, so make sure to subscribe. We're also going to be doing a Fed Watch RSS feed that's just by itself, so that's going to be rolling out soon. So stay posted for that. And like always, make sure to follow me at CK_Snarks. Make sure to follow Ansel at Ansel Lindner. Make sure to share everything online. Make sure to share it wherever you are in the social media world. We appreciate all the support. And of course, those 5-star reviews are much appreciated as well. Cheers, guys.